Who would have ever thought that the poor would be blessed, that the hungry would be blessed, that those who weep would be blessed? But that's what Jesus says in today's gospel. And if Jesus says they are blessed, then obviously Jesus is teaching us that real and genuine blessing and happiness is something other than the common understanding of happiness and blessing. The world today says happiness includes a lot of money, and a lot of pleasure, and even a lot of things that are sinful. We could say that our world today is addicted to greed and sin, and there's a big deception in the world. People are being tricked into thinking that possessing and having will bring happiness. And people are being lured with great promises and expectations of happiness, but they are empty promises and lies. So when Jesus says the poor will be blessed, that the hungry will be blessed, that those who weep will be blessed, that those who hate are hated and driven out because of him will be blessed, obviously Jesus' teaching is something different than what the world is teaching. So what is Jesus' understanding of happiness and blessing? Well, I'm going to quote from St. Augustine. "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." And so what Jesus is doing here is, it's a little bit of shock value, because this would have been shocking to hear, because this, even 2,000 years ago, the same human weakness and fallen nature existed. People strive to become those who had a lot and had a favor with people, and the people who were poor were looked on as nobodies. But let's set this in the context it's in, because before this began, right before this scripture passage, Jesus went up on top of the mountain and spent the entire evening in prayer with his Father, communing with his Father, the whole night, in order so that he could choose his 12 apostles. And then he does that. He chooses the 12, he calls them to himself, and then they come down into this area, and then he spends a lot of time healing people who were sick, delivering people who were possessed, restoring people who need restoration. So he's doing the very things, he's bringing about healing and restoration and peace in people who don't have it. So clearly he's not opposed to being set free from these afflictions, but he's about to give this new teaching that there's something new happening here. And that's why they've never heard this before, because it's new. What's the difference between the old and the new? It's him. It's Jesus. Jesus is going to change everything with regards to suffering. Before Jesus, suffering had no redemptive value and was just pure burden. In fact, the cross was considered a curse. But then he comes, he mounts the cross in an act of love for us. He gives himself over to the Father in place of us who were guilty, and restores all of humanity back to the Father. Heaven is opened, and now the cross becomes not a curse, but the greatest blessing we've ever known. But that's not the end of the story, because all these things he lists today, being poor, being hungry, weeping, being hated, denounced, all these things, they're trials, they're curses, they're crosses. They're sufferings, and sufferings are crosses. And we, as part of the mystical body, have the capability of taking our crosses and uniting them to his cross, because he's the head of that body. And when we do this and we give him our crosses, he converts them to grace to rescue souls. I mean, I've said this 100 times, but it's worth repeating, because the world is batting us over the head saying, avoid all crosses, avoid all suffering. Treat it like the plague. Don't go near it. It's bad for you. You don't want it. Jesus is saying, no, there's something new I'm doing here. I'm going to take your sufferings and convert it to grace to save souls. And so, when we have these crosses, and believe me, whether you want them or not, they're coming. You might say, well, I don't want to participate in this program, Jesus. It doesn't matter. You're still going to be part of it. Whether you unite your cross to his or not, that's your choice. But the only thing worse than suffering is wasted suffering. You don't want to waste your suffering. And so he's giving us a chance here to do this. And what happens out of that? When you know that you and Jesus are collaborating to save souls, you can't be anything but happy. It might even be people in your own family. It might be friends of yours. Who knows? But that's what he's doing. And that's why there's something different at work. And it's not forever. You might notice he uses the word now quite a bit. It's not forever. Our sufferings don't last forever. At the very least, they're going to end at the end of this life. But I'll tell you a secret. There's been several saints who have gone to heaven and come back and been able to pass on to their religious communities. Most of them were religious, nuns and priests. They all said the same thing. Had I known the value of suffering, I would have done so much more suffering in this life. I just didn't recognize it. Had I known, I would have taken more. Just saying what they're telling us. I know it's not attractive. I have a friend in Medjugorje, a nun whose name's Sister Emmanuel. She writes a lot of good books about fasting and penance. And on one of my pilgrimages, I had dinner with her. I wound up making her spaghetti and meatballs, and we had a nice meal. And I said, "Sister, what's new in your prayer life?" She says, "Well, let me tell you, the Lord is asking me when he gives me a new cross that I should thank him for the cross and then ask for another one." "Oh, how's that going?" And she said, "Honestly, I do thank him for the crosses, but I haven't yet asked for a new one because I just don't have that grace yet, but I'm sure by now she does." But the point being, this world is a mess. People are confused and walking away from God in droves. Our Lady has said at least 3 times in the last 2 years, this is the most sinful generation since Adam and Eve. Worse than the flood. And so we have to take this seriously, that if this is a time when so many people are being deceived, so many people are being pulled away from God and pushed into the arms of Satan, that we have opportunities to rescue them by collaborating with Jesus in his work. And this is why there's a lot of suffering available right now. So don't shy away from it. And I'll tell you the other big secret is if you take it to Our Lady first and say, "Will you join me in taking this suffering to Jesus?" she will move you through it quicker and magnify it more and get even more souls because she has that grace. So it's a great gift we can do with these sufferings. I always get afraid when I preach this because I'm like, well, now I've given him permission for a nice big cross to come my way. It's coming. Okay, so the first reading says, "A curse on the man who puts his trust in man, who relies on the things of the flesh." It just goes back to this core theme that God wants us to trust completely in him. Him. Does he want us to be putting one foot with God and the other with the world? No, he really wants us to trust in him completely. So you live your life, but you got to keep coming back to him. I've given that homily about recognizing his presence in our day. If you saw him next to you all day, you would treat your life much differently than we currently do. He's right there in our midst. We just can't see him. But the more we can recognize his presence, the more we're going to have a deeper relationship with him. And in doing that, then we will put more trust in him. It all goes back to relationship. And it's important for us to spend time every day. I'm a priest, so most of my life revolves around God just by the nature of what I do for a living. But it doesn't stop me from every day getting up at 4:30 so I can get over here by 5:30. So I have my own holy hour before the Eucharist, before the public holy hour. That's important. It's so important that I do it, even the days I don't want to get up. And now with the dog, he has to go out first, which is adding more time to my morning schedule, which I don't like. And then the first thing in the morning is going out into 20-degree cold, and shaking for the first 5 minutes of my morning and then coming in and going on with my day. But you know what? When I get here and he's there, it's all worth it. Because I'm like, it's just you and me, Lord. What do we want to talk about today? And I bring him all of you. There's a lot to say about all of you. He loves you immensely. And you know what he always says? He says, it's my gift to you that I've given you these people to care for. It's gift to me to care for you. That's how much he loves you. So today, as we move through this beautiful Sunday day, let's put our focus on him, trusting that when he gives us a cross, small or large, we will unite it back to him to save people's lives, literally, spare them from hell. You know, there really can be joy in the suffering. I know this from personal experience, and I've been deceived too. I left God for 22 years chasing the world and its promises, and that didn't work out well at all. I went into a severe depression by the time I finally got rescued. But, you know, I look at people who have immense crosses. My mother right now has 4 huge crosses, terrible, horrible, debilitating problems with her health, and they're very painful. And yet when I call her, she'll always wind up laughing. She'll always make a joke. She's always quick to, be positive, ask me, well, what's going on with you? Don't worry about me. How does she do that? Because her relationship with Jesus is paramount in her life, and she knows the value of offering her sufferings back to him. You know, she's also very quick to say, well, you know, I have a priest as a son, so of course I'm going to suffer. I say, oh, thank you for reminding me that I am the cause of your sufferings. It's a beautiful thing, Mother. But seriously, you know, there is a joy in it because she knows that God's trusting her with these crosses because there's people waiting for those graces. And there can be nothing greater than helping God save souls. And remember, you have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts will be restless until they rest in you.